Okay, so as of recording this video, it is being reported widely that Keir Starmer is set to step down as PM, and he's going to allow the way for Andy Burnham to take over, given whatever support he had left seems like it's collapsing around him, and it looks like he's finally had a come to Jesus moment and realised that it's time for Keir Starmer to step down. I'll touch about that at the end of the video because this video is about something that, to be honest, I think is just far more serious and to me far more worrying about where this country's going to go over the next couple of years. So a lot of you might have seen that there was another pretty bad knife attack in Edinburgh, and there's video circulating of a man walking around with his top off with a pretty big knife. He's attacking businesses, and he was specifically targeting Muslim people. 5 men were attacked. Thankfully, none had serious or life-threatening injuries. We know he was targeting Muslim people because he literally was screaming it in the street. So when the police had him pinned down, he was screaming at the police, saying, quote, "I'm protecting the effing country. I'm protecting the country from these Muslims raping our young daughters and our kids. Enough is enough. I've had enough." End quote. I've kind of paraphrased a little bit at the end because the YouTube doesn't like it when you swear or say the R word, especially when you use kids in the same context. So this follows on from multiple attacks over the recent few weeks. Of course, we had the Belfast attack, which led to the riots, and very quickly followed by that 17-year-old girl who was just walking down the street, and an Afghan man came up behind her and just stabbed her in the neck. Thankfully, she survived without any serious injuries. Around the same time as this, there was a young girl who was basically abducted by 4 men in Bristol, and well, you can imagine what happened to her when she was in their control, and then they fled. They actually escaped the country, and thankfully the French police happened to pick them up. So yeah, another tick in the box for the British policing system there. And of course that follows on from the tensions of the whole Henry Novak and Vikram Digwa situation. So this is a real tinderbox at the moment. Of course then Rupert Lowe released his rape gang inquiry. Interestingly, all of the mainstream media pretty much has ignored that completely. But the thing is, you listen to what the guy said, and I just clearly am not condoning it, and this is what I'm worried about. But you hear what he says is, "Enough, I've had enough." And just that sentence, obviously not the acts that he did, but the sentence itself is kind of the mood of a lot of people in the country at the moment. And obviously most people are normal and level-headed and are not going to go out seeking vigilante sort of, I don't even know what you would call that, but it's certainly not justice when you just go around targeting people because they are Muslims. And it's the same, for the Manchester mosque attacks. There was the attacks recently where a Muslim man attacked Jews in the street and stabbed them just completely, unprovoked, and just going around doing that. So this is what the point I'm trying to get at. I'm very worried at the moment because this is how civil war starts. We've seen a lot of attacks on the native people of Britain by people who just came over as illegals or even legals, and we haven't really seen any retaliation, and this is kind of the first sort of wave of retaliations. We saw the Belfast riots where they were going around evicting immigrants, or they didn't know whether they were legal or non-legal, but they were kind of just targeting HMOs and stuff like that. That was the first big worry. That was the start of the sort of signs that something is seriously wrong here. And now this is obviously a step up again now, because that is extremely worrying, that a man is just reacting to the situation that we are finding ourselves in this country, and obviously not reacting very well, and reacting terribly, in fact. But this is how civil war starts, I think. I honestly do. And when you look then this weekend in Birmingham, there was a Britain First march in Birmingham, which is obviously, a very, very diverse area. So there was probably a reason why they targeted that area to cause the maximum amount of effect. But I saw them videos of groups of masked men going around shouting "Allahu Akbar," allegedly looking for people with Union Jacks. That's what was being reported online. Now, that is just people reporting on Instagram, but the videos were real because I've literally watched them myself. And of course, we get the same platitudes coming from the people in charge, but they're not doing anything. And my worry is that this doesn't slow down from here now. This escalates from here because the tensions continue to rise, and when more and more of these actions happen, literally nobody feels safe. And when nobody feels safe is when people begin to lash out and do stupid things and carry knives and weapons to protect themselves. And it just starts to spitball from you, and you're seeing more and more kind of, I don't want to call them vigilante groups at the moment, but you're kind of seeing more like citizen patrols going around and walking around streets at night to make sure girls are safe. What would they do if they found someone harassing a girl? Would they kind of citizens arrest them, or would they, commit violence? We don't know, and this is where it's going to escalate. And the biggest worry is that the police, the judiciary, and most of all, the people in charge, the politicians, are not doing anything to sort this out. All they're doing is trying to censor the internet and censor the news, but no one's actually doing anything. So this is not going to stop on its own without some serious intervention. And I honestly think there's a few simple ways they could do it. Of course, a lot of this comes from there's issues with the economy, everything's hard for everyone, and that just builds tension naturally. So you kind of look to others and say like, oh, maybe he's the reason, or she's the reason, or that group is the reason why my life is not as good. So the easy things for these governments to do is actually just stop the immigration, because if you stop the tap, then it takes a bit of it just releases the pressure valve that everyone's feeling at the moment, and that will kind of calm tensions down. Now that won't solve everything, and I'm not naive enough to think that, but that would be a big start. And then you've got to get the policing fairly and evenly, and cut out all these wasting the police time on these non-crime hate incidents that just are basically going around and being the thought police, when then the police are not actually doing policing work and stopping crimes and solving cases. They're literally just going around knocking door to door and telling you, oh, you've said something that could offend someone and upset someone on Facebook. It's absolutely ridiculous. Go out there and stop crime, and do it fair and evenly. No group or ethnicity should get fairer or more preferential treatment over anyone, whether you're white, black, Muslim, Asian, it doesn't matter. Everyone should be policed the exact same, and then no one can have a gripe, and no one can feel like there's a chip on their shoulder, they're being treated unfairly compared to another group. And that kind of goes on to the second part, which is you've got to get this grooming gang inquiry going. We had Rupert Lowe come out with his private one, which he never should have had to do, but it was very detailed and very good. And I think if the government really would use that, or use some of the research as that as their basis, and then they can actually go with a full inquiry with all of the money that's going into it. But they've not even started. There's no evidence being gathered, and there is no way that anyone is going to get actually the justice they deserve for allowing this to continue and perpetuate until this is done properly by the government and by the police. But unfortunately, because there's so many of Labour councillors and police committing atrocities intertwined with this, they've got no reason to look into it, because they're going to be shining a light on themselves. But if they just went in and did this inquiry and did it properly, and actually started taking people to court for the part they played in it, and start punishing people and putting people in jail that allowed this suffering to go on for so long, then again it would be a pressure release valve, because you would say, right, it's absolutely terrible and horrendous that this went on for so long, but at least they're doing something about it now retrospectively. It doesn't make it better, and it doesn't heal the wounds for the victims that will unfortunately never be healed. But what it can do is allow some of the native population to realise that you're listening to them, and that you're just actually doing your job as the police and as a government. So just to finish on this bit, I'm just worried. I've said in my couple of previous videos, I'm pretty worried about the state of the UK at the moment, and I'm worried that if this continues, we are going to see more vigilante groups pop up. We're going to see more attacks like this, and the government just seem inept in being able to deal with it, which is a worry. And then moving on from there, the Starminator looks like he's finally going to step down. I mean, he hasn't confirmed it yet, so you never know with him. But it looks like Burnham is going to take over. And let me know if you want me to do a bit more of an in-depth video into this later on or after the news has come out. But for me, there's not really much difference between them. Burnham will come in, he'll be actually human as opposed to Keir Starmer, which will give him a little bump in the ratings. It'll improve Labour's ratings and Labour voters' feelings about the party. But ultimately, in 6 months' time, nothing would have changed. The country's still going to just fall into just degradation because the backbench is not going to let him cut the welfare. He can't really borrow anymore because we're almost insolvent as it is, and he's basically going to come in and not be able to fix anything. And he is a socialist by nature, and there's just no more money to borrow, and so he's not going to cut welfare. He's not going to be able to do anything that he wants. And yes, he might understand and give a nice smile, and he might feel more like a real human as opposed to Keir Starmer. But in 6 months' time, the country's going to be where it is, or even worse. So, by the way, that will be 7 prime ministers in 10 years. Apparently, they want a 3-month transition as well, so we're not getting rid of Stalin just yet. But I just don't think it'll change anything. But if you want me to do a more in-depth video, let me know on that in the comments, and I will catch you later.